Good afternoon, and welcome to this online policy dialogue on bioeconomy, a driver for the European Green Deal, organized by the European Policy Center and supported by the European Investment Bank. My name is Stefan Sipka. I'm a policy analyst at APC, and I'll be moderating this event. So today we'll talk about bioeconomy, what it is, how it contributes to our economy, society, and environment, how can it support the European Green Deal, including also the challenges that need to be addressed along this path. This event is relevant also because of the recent Commission's report on the bioeconomy. Also recently, the Commission proposed nature restoration targets in June. This discussion is also relevant for Fit for 55 package, for Repower EU, and of course to the unfortunate war in Ukraine brought by Russian invasion, which reminds us again that it is high time to rethink how we can use our renewable biological resources in a smarter way and in order to create a more resilient and more sustainable European economy. We will start with a pre-recorded statement by Joanna Drake, Deputy Director General for Research and Innovation from the European Commission, and we will hear about how where we are with making bioeconomy a driver for the Green Deal, and also some reflections on the key findings from the report I just mentioned. Then we will move on to the panel discussion. But yes, let's hear the recording first.
Dear colleagues, I would like to welcome you to the online policy dialogue on bioeconomy, a driver for the European Green Deal. My sincere thanks to the European Policy Centre for organising this highly relevant and timely event. Just a few weeks ago, the European Commission has published a report, European Bioeconomy Policy, Stocktaking and Future Developments, and it assessed the progress made on the implementation of our EU Bioeconomy Strategy. The report further reflects on the increased importance of the bioeconomy in the new political environment framed by the European Green Deal. Your discussion today will be important to continue the discussion and to understand what we can do to embark on a path to a prospering, climate-neutral and fair society. Let me first of all start to outline what the European Commission understands by bioeconomy. Bioeconomy is a catalyst for systemic change. It tackles the economic, social and environmental aspects of sustainability. It seeks new ways of producing and consuming biological resources and doing so while respecting our planetary boundaries. Commission President von der Leyen was very clear when she stated that the fossil-fueled economy has reached its limits. With the bioeconomy, we will move away from the linear economy, based on the extensive use of fossil and mineral resources, and we go towards a more sustainable and circular economy based on renewable biological resources. Already today, the bioeconomy provides a substantial contribution to Europe's economy by employing around 17.5 million people with an estimated contribution of 4.7% of the EU GDP. Now, to move ahead with the bioeconomy in Europe, we updated our bioeconomy strategy in 2018. That's already 4 years ago. The strategy identifies 3 main action areas for the bioeconomy in the European Union: the strengthening and scaling up of the bio-based sectors, unlocking investments and markets, deploying local bioeconomies rapidly across Europe, and understanding the ecological boundaries of the bioeconomy. Now, what's the relationship between bioeconomy and the Green Deal? The European Green Deal is the most transformative political initiative in Europe in recent decades. The Green Deal's ambition is to make Europe the first climate-neutral continent by 2050. It will be impossible to reach this ambitious climate goal without innovative, renewable and bio-based solutions. The bioeconomy provides fair and just transition solutions for the benefit of everybody, everywhere. Due to the holistic nature of the bioeconomy, it will be possible to make best use of land and sea and their resources on the basis of nature-based solutions. Circular and climate-neutral bioeconomy applications will also help deliver on our ambitious EU missions. For instance, under the mission Restore Our Ocean and Waters, nature-based solutions to restore ecosystems will help make our coastal communities weatherproof and climate resilient. More circular design and bio-based materials will reduce pollution of our seas and oceans and make the blue economy more sustainable and climate neutral. The bioeconomy will be indispensable and will help to build a society and economy based on the principles of circularity, fairness, and sustainability in all its dimensions, while it is climate positive and independent from fossil and scarce resources. In that sense, we can also say that the bioeconomy is the society we live in after successfully delivering the European Green Deal objectives. But this won't always be easy, and sometimes hard decisions have to be taken. For example, to harvest a tree or to leave it for environmental protection. Identifying and solving such trade-offs on the best use of biomass and land has been recognized as a key strength of the bioeconomy in our progress report. And we found very promising developments too of the bioeconomy in Europe. For instance, an increasing number of national and regional bioeconomy strategies, and especially the progress made in Central and Eastern European countries. We have been further successful in mobilizing private funds for research and innovation through the bio-based industries joint undertaking and its successor partnership, Circular Bio-Based Europe. Moreover, we are supporting startups and small and medium-sized enterprises, such as through the European Circular Bioeconomy Fund. Yet, we also identified gaps that require further action. First of all, an increased focus on how to better manage land and biomass demands to meet environment and economic requirements in a climate-neutral Europe will be needed. Second, work on more sustainable consumption patterns to ensure environmental integrity, which has to follow. Dear participants, I wish you all very fruitful discussions during today's meeting. I would like to stress once more the importance of the bioeconomy in enabling green transition. Lastly, I would like to invite you all to continue this discussion at our high-level bioeconomy conference taking place here in Brussels on the 6th and 7th October of this year. Working together, I am sure that we'll be able to manage the deeply transformative changes ahead of us.
Thank you. I would like to thank Joanna Drake and the entire team for this statement. I think it was very valuable, very inspiring, and sets the scene for today's discussion. Thank you very much once again. And now I would like to move on to our panelists for today. We will also hear from our respondent later on, and we will have the Q&A session afterwards. I would like to encourage our participants, however, to write their questions in the Q&A as soon as they can, so that we can address as many questions as possible. So without any further ado, I would like to introduce our first panelist for today, Felipe Ortega Schlingmann, Head of Division, Bioeconomy, European Investment Bank. Felipe, happy to have you here with us today, and happy to hear about an overview of EIB's work on the bioeconomy, and also, let's say, this like a financial investment side to this topic.
Thank you, Stefan. If I think if the organization can, okay, perfect. Exactly. So yeah, as I said, thank you, Stefan, for the introductory words, and also to the European Policy Center for inviting the EIB into this discussion forum on a very relevant subject, which is the bioeconomy and the bioeconomy sector's contribution to the European deal objectives and the green transition, which is a very important one. In these kind of events, I never know how well acquainted the audience is with the EIB. So please, next slide, if you let me just very briefly, I promise I won't be very long on this next slide. It's not changing. Okay. Yeah. So very quick introduction on what the EIB is and what it does. So the EIB is an European institution. It was founded with the Treaty of Rome together with all other institutions in 1958 with the mission to support EU territorial integration and the implementation of EU policy framework through its loan-based financing. It is owned by the EU member states, and in 2019, very timely, and at the same time as the introduction of the Bioeconomy Strategy and also the first discussions on the Green Deal, the EIB member states in the EIB board actually agreed that the EIB should transform itself into the EU Climate Bank. What does this entail? It means that there were a number of objectives associated to it, but the main ones is that by 2021, the EIB's annual financing of around 50 to 60 billion euros, and just as a side remark, the bioeconomy lending is quite relevant within this overall lending portfolio, up to 10%, depending on the year. Had to be aligned with low carbon and climate resilient development as agreed at the COP23 in Paris. So that means they have to be Paris aligned. This is what we normally say. And by 2025, 50% of the EIB financing would substantially contribute to climate and environmental protection. All this with at the same time the EIB following up on its objectives of European integration and economic development that should of course prevail and overlap with these as well. If you go to the next slide, please. So the EIB's activity in the bioeconomy, but also in all other sectors, is predominantly centered around three axes. So we say the axis of lending, which is with comprehends a number of financing products that attend to a broad range of sectors, but also the bioeconomy as such. And as I said before, between 4 and 6 billion euros a year of the overall EIB portfolio, lending portfolio, is lent to the bioeconomy sector, and as well through the blending of these lending instruments and the EIB own resources with money that predominantly is coming from the EU through guarantee schemes and others. There is also the scope of leveraging these funds and increasing the scope and the policy delivery potential of EU funds through the EIB lending. Very significantly is also the activity of the EIF, which has a number of agriculture and bioeconomy related mandates, and every year they enable between 3 and 4 billion euros of lending as well, together with the EIB's one. Then last but not least, the advisory work that supports the lending and blending activity by doing tailor-made studies and assessment and development work for policy development and product development, and where then also very importantly the activity through InvestEU Advisory Hub and other activities is to enable the implementation, so the preparation and implementation of projects as well as such. Very relevant was, for example, the activity of the advisory in the execution of, for example, a bioeconomy market assessment, where different investment barriers and markets were actually highlighted, and which resulted through its conclusions in the European Circular Bioeconomy Fund that was just mentioned by the Deputy DG of DG RTD, Joanna Drake. Next slide, please. Very quickly, the Green Deal gives special attention to the bioeconomy sector, as it is associated with many opportunities and also some challenges. These were highlighted by Joanna Drake in the previous address. But just let me mention that, of course, challenges, I think everybody knows, because it's discussed almost on a daily basis, that there are very significant contributions by the agricultural, but also the bioeconomy sector still through direct and indirect activities or direct indirect contribution to the greenhouse gas emission and environmental footprint opportunity, because precisely there is a need to action to reduce this footprint, and at the same time there is also great potential of the sector to contribute to climate change mitigation and adaptation and environmental and biodiversity sustainability. We believe that with its eligibility framework that I just mentioned before, where the whole activity of the EIB has to be channeled through these investment windows or policy windows that were mentioned in the slide before, we see that there is great potential and aligned interest of the EIB to enhance its support to sustainable bioeconomy projects as a mean to contribute to the European Green Deal, and thereby also advance its ambition to be and become the EU climate bank. Let me give a couple of examples along the bullets that are in this slide. So as I said before, the EIB supplies between 4 and 6 billion euros of annual lending to the bioeconomy, of which around 70% is to farmers and SMEs along the bioeconomy value chain. We are what we call intermediate lending projects. So these are, because we are a relatively small institution, we work with partner banks to channel EIB liquidity to these smaller entities that we cannot reach directly. And then also highlight that over 50% of the EIB financing already today of direct lending in the past years were relevant as climate and environmental finance. So they were classified as climate and environmental finance. With an enhanced focus on activities such as supporting carbon sequestration or carbon farming in forestry and agricultural activities, in biomaterials, the prevention and valorization of food waste, and enhancing the water economy and irrigation, we believe that the EIB can do even more to significantly contribute to climate action and environmental sustainability. We also have a long experience in supporting food and biomass processes in becoming more sustainable through circular economy and energy efficiency investments. And the EIB has been very active in supporting private and public sector in financing research and development in the bioeconomy and agriculture. Last but not least, EIB is one of the main financier in the world on the forest, primary forests, and the support to natural capital and biodiversity has a priority. So just as a first remark here is that with regard to the slide is that the financing for us, for the financing of viable and sustainable activities in the bioeconomy that is promoted by farmers, their cooperatives, downstream SMEs and corporates offers a clear path to support the employment and economic green growth and innovation in rural areas, and therefore not leaving anybody behind and promoting the green transition. Just let me very quickly, I don't know how I'm doing with time, Stefan, but very quickly go through a couple of concrete examples of EIB, what the EIB has done in the last years. Next slide. So the first one is an example of an upgrade of a pulp and paper mill in Sweden and associated investments in forestry activities of one of the main forest holders and forest operators of the country. So the project entailed the upgrading of this mill with substantial externalities in terms of energy efficiency, water efficiency, resource efficiency, and the replanting of 68,000 hectares of forests, and upgrading associated infrastructure, which of course through this, through the support of sustainable forest activities, not only in this project but in others, the EIB is quite active in enhancing the sequestration of CO2 in agricultural and forest biomass. The total loan amount was 150 million out of a total project of cost of close to 700 million euros. The next slide. Very relevant is also the support of research in agriculture on different activities. Here, I would like to highlight one that is very important, which is the development of new seeds, which is earmarked in the Green Deal as one of the key needs for making the agricultural systems more resilient and also more resource efficient as such. And over the last years, the EIB has provided finance to four agro-business companies that are active in seed development, with a total loan amount of close to 500 million euros. And last but not least, last slide. But EIB does not only finance large investments in this area, but is also quite active through its thematic products that are enabled through blending with EU funds, and more recently also on the InvestEU thematic activity on the support of the economic transition models through targeted support to very specific small companies or small and medium companies that are upscaling alternative models alongside the bioeconomy value chain. So here we have a number of examples in aquaculture, smart agriculture, plastic replacement and biomaterial development, and so on, that I'm not going to go in detail, but we have quite a number of projects very recently in the pipeline along these project lines, thanks to the support of course, and the joint activity and efforts with the EU Commission and particularly DG RTD on these projects. I had also prepared a slide on the impact of Ukraine, but as I'm out of time, I just leave it here and not going into much detail. The only area which I wanted to highlight is that, of course, due to the price discussions and food supply issues that we are seeing already in the world, and not so much in the EU, we are a bit shielded from these problems. It is quite likely that the food versus biofuel biomaterial will resurface, and it has already. In fact, there has been a number of press articles and so on, and just highlight that through its Paris alignment criteria that the EIB has defined in the framework of the CBR, it already aligns with the taxonomy and ruling out the use of food products for biofuels, but also as a mainstream feedstock for biomaterials. Thanks a lot, and with this I just close. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Felipe, for this very interesting overview when it comes to, let's say, the policy areas and projects supported by the EIB, and it's also very it's good to know about this scope of possibilities, also for any future projects, prospects when it comes to investments in the bioeconomy in the future, but also highlighting the challenges that appear to be also worsened by the war in Ukraine. This also builds on what Joanna Drake mentioned about potential trade-offs between different goals that need to be met, and also when it comes to aligning bioeconomy with the Green Deal. Happy to come back to some of these topics at a later stage. So I would now like to give the floor to our next panelist, Agnes Borg, Director, Industrial Biotechnology Council from EuropaBio, and happy to hear your take on the bioeconomy, how it can be aligned with the Green Deal, including also any interesting, innovative examples of how we can improve our bioeconomy and also contributing to sustainability. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Stefan, and thank you for inviting EuropaBio to this event today. And I'm stepping in from EuropaBio side today as Claire Scantleberry cannot make it. And for those of you who don't know EuropaBio yet, so it's the industry association representing the biotechnology industry in Europe with a focus on healthcare and industrial biotechnology applications. And EuropaBio is active in increasing the communications around the benefits of the biotechnology as an enabling technology for the bioeconomy, and in increasing or in the creation of a coherent and positive innovation climate and policy climate for biotechnology and the bio-based industries in Europe. So of course, the topic for discussion today is very important for us, and already looking at the question that is the title of the event itself, we think that the bioeconomy is and should be a driver for the Green Deal. And yeah, we've heard already mentioned, and we'll hear more, I'm sure, about the recent Bioeconomy Progress Report. And we welcome that this frames the important role of the bioeconomy in the current EU policy climate and also in the Green Deal context. And of course, the bioeconomy is cross-sectoral in nature, and it's important to emphasize synergies and links with other policies and ensure policy coherence. And as you said, I've been asked to speak a bit further about innovative and sustainable approaches and practices when it comes to the bioeconomy and use of renewable resources. And of course, just to say initially, the biorefinery is of course at the center of the bioeconomy as the factories or the processing units that convert the bio-waste or the biomass or the bio-waste. And they valorize the different components of the feedstock to produce a wide range of different everyday products, ingredients across sectors. And I think it's important to mention as a driver, or as one of the drivers of innovation in the bio-based sector, is to increasingly and gradually ensure that all the potential feedstock sources are produced in a way that uses all the components in the smartest, most efficient way, whilst adding the greatest possible value. And of course, over time, this also contributes to new, innovative, intermediate, and final products and applications being developed. But the potential of the bioeconomy doesn't lie only in the fact that it provides food and feed materials and that it can replace fossil carbon-based chemicals, materials, and fuels. I think it's also important to mention here that biomass has a versatile chemical composition, which can be benefited from, and also some bio-based products can offer new and novel properties and functionalities. And also from the biotechnology perspective, so biotechnology already contributes to the bioeconomy as an enabling technology with an increasing economic and employment impact in Europe. So biotechnology enables a variety of products and applications. For example, the production of bio-based chemicals by using renewable sources instead of fossil sources. Microorganisms that are improved to enhance the production of chemical building blocks, which can be applied in several different industries like textiles, plastics, etc. Biochemical building blocks transformed into a range of products, and as mentioned, with either similar or additional functionality compared to the fossil-based products. And I also wanted to bring some other examples because another one is in the creation of complex molecules and substances. And we see, for example, in the flavors and fragrances fields, these are conventionally produced through extraction from natural sources or chemical synthesis. So here, biotechnology is an alternative and innovative production option. Biotechnology and production can be an important competitive advantage for this sector, for example, which is a high value one, low volume, but also with a very broad application potential. I think another way or another example or a field is the moving increasingly away from chemical processes for the production of food ingredients or food supplements. And I think vitamin B2 is a great example here. And it was also one of the examples that we highlighted in last year's 25th anniversary of EuropaBio, because almost all the world's supply is now produced via microbial fermentation after many years of complex and low-yielding chemical manufacture. So if we look over the past years, the production has shifted towards biotechnological production process. And this has shown benefits like reduction in fossil raw materials, reduction of water use, etc. And I think another example is, or another topic area is the one of replacing natural extraction for ingredients. And here, for example, I wanted to mention the sweetener stevia. In the stevia example, companies have been working towards engineering yeast to produce stevia components that are identical to the ones that can be found in the plant itself. And this can also, or this way of producing stevia can also contribute towards both reduction in carbon footprint and land use. And another example that we are looking a lot at, but I think is maybe not the main topic of today's discussion, is as well the manufacture of alternatives to animal production, and alternative proteins, cellular agriculture, etc. And this comes in a variety of different options, and you will for sure have seen alternative meat production in the media and the headlines, and dairy is also catching up quickly. But I think in light of examples that I mentioned, we see this also reflected in a variety of company or types of companies, innovative and competitive SMEs. They are emerging in Europe, but also worldwide. And many of EuropaBio's small company members are either experts in the engineering of microbial strain for large-scale fermentation in larger companies, or breakthrough companies in the manufacture itself. And I think it's gaining both investment and attention. And also, of course, large companies are introducing further microbial fermentation into their processes, which brings the more at-scale manufacture perspective that Europe also needs in order to deliver the green transition. And these are some of the examples that I wanted to mention now at the outset of the discussion. And for now, I thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Agnes, for your reflections on these and also presenting these interesting cases, how actually new innovative solutions and biotechnology can actually not only help replace, for example, fossil sources, but also even add value on top of that with new functionalities. So it's also not just substituting, but it's actually adding value. So that is also very interesting. And of course, happy to come back to some of these and discuss how this can be scaled up further, and any additional reflections on what you're doing. Thank you. And now I would like to give the floor to Horst Fehrenbach, Scientific Director, Institute for Energy and Environmental Research, ifeu. Horst, happy to have you here, and happy to hear your reflections on possibilities and challenges with linking bioeconomy and the EU's green agenda.
Thank you so much for this introduction and for inviting me. I'm very happy to have the opportunity also to talk to you here. Shall I share my screen maybe, or you already did it here? So fine. I had a couple of more brief, small animations in my presentation done now, but it's well, we can work with this properly also. Yeah, so about the possibilities and challenges, specifically linking bioeconomy and the EU green agenda. And on the next slide, I just also repeated some guiding question, which was also asked for us to consider also in our presentations in here specifically. And oh, there's a typo. I already see that's not corrected. Pardon. What are, let's say, what are the EU works on, specifically on the major topics like climate action, circular economy, food systems, environmental protection, zero pollution, and biodiversity. And I will refer briefly to a couple of these, and also finally then on a final subsuming slide all together a little bit what might be bioeconomy dealing with all these things, and overall the question what kind of challenges does bioeconomy pose for environmental sustainability and how this could be addressed via policies and investments. And on the next slide, I will go briefly into this question on the climate change question. As it was already mentioned by Agnes, it is on not only, but it is on a wide level. It is about replacing fossil resources, the fuels and the products, which would make a lot of really sense in this way on dealing with bio-based materials, bio-based stuff, and a bio-based economy for the replacement of fossil resources, which we know is one of the major problems for causing the climate change. Another thing also in between, of course, we talk about innovative things there that might improve efficiency overall in processes, and particularly, for instance, also in the food sector, in the food sector specifically. And on the one hand, also when we talk about carbon and this way and replacing one carbon biogenic, we introduced the biogenic in terms of replacing fossil ones. Then also we see a possibility also on the question not mentioned here on this slide, but very important, on carbon storage questions in there. But when we now look on the 2030 climate target plan, the policy there, I just tried before this meeting having a look on this, and I was a little bit disappointed to find a very, very low reference to the bio world in there. Overall, it is a very strong focus just only on bioenergy, particularly on biofuel. The bioeconomy as such, beyond biofuel, is just incidentally mentioned in there, and that is a pity. We have a brief reference to bioplastics and biodegradable plastics, which is still also not bio-based in this way, not naturally. That we have a small reference to the question of more using wood in buildings, and once also talking about algae, and that was, let's say, all of it. And on the next slide, want to show you also a little bit, introduce into the dimension on the mass flows we have there in the European Union when we talk about biomass and where might come also all this feedstock from and to which application it is land. And so when we talk here first, in this first diagram I took from JRC colleagues, a very current work, biomass from agriculture. We see, of course, crop production is the major source here, but what is also the outcome is, you see also when you click maybe just once, there should be yes, there should be this. Okay, this was a little bit early, but sorry. You see that feed and bedding here. Maybe with my mouse, you might see what's happening there. So we have of course, what we need from our crop production is massively the feed and bedding and food production in there. This includes, of course, the food products and all together in there. And we have a very, very small amount also only on plant-based, on plant-based food first. We have a lot of feed in there, which tells us a lot about our food system, which might be improved in a way that it would need less crop production in total. But what we see here which I shown in in the red circles in here is that what's going into the material use and into the bioenergy also is a very, very low amount. So from all together, and it's very, very, very low. What's about fibers and others, what is meant by bio-based material that goes currently into material application, and also the bioenergy thing from crop production is just very low. What we see on the other side, when we go here on the left bottom, we see that there are, of course, a lot of not harvested residues that can be used for application as a feedstock. And on the next slide, we see the situation for the biomass from forestry. This is the other part of the world here. And of course, I don't have something for the ocean, for water-based biomass, which also could be a big resource today. Of course, it is just compared to cropping and to forestry, a low amount. But here you see that the domestic roundwood which comes from left here into our mass flow in Europe, we see that only a small part is going into, again, here in this case, to the material flow. You might click once that you see it also to highlight what is mentioned directly. Please have one click. Yes, thank you. And you see that the solid wood products and the wood pulp, which is the material use here, is here really also the very low amount of the overall feedstock input, and very high share of all of this is going into energy. And on the next slide, I tried to bring this together on one thing and to compare it also versus the fossil resources, which will appear in a few seconds on the right-hand side. So we see from agriculture, we see that we have around these 700 million tons of dry matter as an input, and we have also this 140 non-harvested residues, and we see for material use and energy use only a very, very low portion is applied, while from forestry we see this is a little bit lower amount, but this goes again to altogether, of course, to material use and energy use. It's no other use into and that. And so we have 130 to material use, which is the lower share compared to the energy use of nearly 200. And you see here from the biomass we apply, which is non-food, in the non-food sector, we have a clear dominance of the energy use of 208. And when we now look what should be replaced, and now we look on the coal, oil, and natural gas, well, you need to click once again. Sorry. Yes, you see the numbers, which is the fossil world, which should be replaced. And we see there from coal, oil, and natural gas, we have a tremendous mass on energy use, which is then 1,100 in total altogether. And we have the very, very low amount of material use only that goes into plastics, goes into ammonia production from natural gas and so forth, lubricants, and altogether all this stuff from fossil world is very low. And when we compare now what we have on the left side for energy use, for instance, on the bio-based world, and what we have as a need to be substituted, we see that we will always fail to replace a large amount of the energy in use from fossil side by bio-based, but we have a strong possibility to apply material that is really used for bio-based material, specifically from forestry, which is actually used for energy use, can replace at a strong way also the material use from fossil so far. And on the next slide, I will try to summarize these points now from what I said to climate action. First of all, where we see, of course, by this, if we substitute in a relevant share fossil-based materials, we can really do also a big deal in the way on replacing also and mitigating greenhouse gas emissions in there. And as I said, when we just try to concentrate to replace the large amount on on fossil fuel by bioenergy, we see that will always end up by a marginal role in this way. When we talk about circular economy, it gets even more clear that circular economy means priority is always on material use, because you cannot go in circles if you burn a material that is directly produced, has been directly produced, and then you burn it. So you cannot keep it in a circular economy in there. So final use for energy only after the use phase, and that is again something we have also learned in some cases that called the cascading, the so-called cascading principle that should be really considered in here. When you talk about the food system, then again we should see that it's clear that bio, and also it was mentioned several times before, biomass for bioeconomy shall require land at least as possible, because land is really a scarce resource, and specifically bioeconomy should really serve in that way to optimize food systems, as we had some examples mentioned already before, specifically by Agnes in her presentation. And environmental protection, zero pollution, that's again means in particular to minimize environmental burdens and pollutions by these new and advanced technologies, and specifically also to protect biodiversity in line to that. So in a matter of times, I don't want to concentrate much more on that and come to my last slide. This means then the take-home message. What I want to say also with the connection with all the other strategies we have out there and policies, we see that bioeconomy does not by itself automatically lead to climate mitigation and to is in line with circular economy, safe food and protection of environment and so forth. On the contrary, virtually bioeconomy calls for a coherent integration, getting coherently integrated into the strategy mentioned before against climate change, circular economy and so forth, which is not really done because many of these strategies are controversial to what is also the major thinking behind the biodiversity, the optimal of the biodiversity economy output. And in brief, so the linkage of the concerning strategy, it must be done actively. So it is not, it comes not without saying. And so again, the last thing, once again, through the energy issue, we know it is alarming. Everybody knows Germany is very scared about the natural gas problem and so forth. But on the other hand, we see the material use of biomass should be, even though given clear priority over bioenergy. And that's what I wanted to close and give a message to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Horst, for this very interesting presentation, and indeed for highlighting this fact that bioeconomy can't be reduced to discussions over bioenergy, and that there is this strong material side to bioeconomy that needs to be emphasized because of its huge also potentials to help reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, either by substituting fossil fuels or also by serving as a carbon storage, and also that much more needs to be done in the sense to actually try to strengthen the material side rather than bioenergy, and also to try to use the residual, the waste that is created in this entire process, as you illustrated very well in your slides. So thank you so much. Of course, happy to come back to some of these points. We already have one question we can address later concerning one of the aspects you mentioned. But yes, now I would like to come back to the Commission to give the floor to Adrian Leip, Head of Sector, Bioeconomy, DG Research and Innovation. And also building on already what Ms. Drake mentioned and also other speakers, if happy to hear any, say, additional reflections from your side on the bioeconomy and how it can support the Green Deal and the measures that we need to take to achieve this goal. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Stefan, and thank you very much for inviting me. Now, I must admit that I think that Joanna Drake, our Deputy Director General, has a little bit anticipated also your guiding questions, and she has presented our progress report that we published just early June. It's just a few weeks ago now. So I hope you will not bear with me that some of the content that I will report now is similar to what Joanna was already saying. And but I hope that I will able to add a few nuances, a few additional information, so that it will be nevertheless interesting for you. Unfortunately, though, some of the points that I would like to make has been just made by Horst. So I think it really sounded like hearing your presentation that you were a ghostwriter of our progress report. A lot of what we have done is really in the spirit of what you were just saying. And I hope that that might also come through my presentation, the few slides that I've prepared now. Now, let's start with the question, what do we understand with the bioeconomy? You might know that bioeconomy strategies, bioeconomy policies are existing in many countries, not only in Europe, also outside Europe. And there are small differences in what actually is meant with having a bioeconomy policy. Here is the EU definition. The bioeconomy really encompasses a very broad definition, encompasses all sectors and the services that are associated that produce, use, process, distribute, or consume biological resources. And we explicitly also include ecosystem services. They are part of the bioeconomy as we understand it in Europe. And of course, we have already heard that bioeconomy provides a lot of solutions that brings us to a green transformation as it is called for in the European Green Deal. And in a way, we can say if we have a success with the European Green Deal, that's what also Joanna was saying, then we are living in a world that is a lot more based on biological resources, those products will replace, as you just said, Horst, a lot of those materials that we are using now, which are fossil-based. So in a way, we are saying that the bioeconomy could also be the result, the end point of the green transformation. But of course, as you also said, not automatically, if a process, a value chain uses biomass, it is sustainable. That's by no way the case. If biological resources, biomass would be an unlimited supply, that if we are using biomass, there would be no implications on biodiversity, on other environmental and climate objectives. But this is not the case. We know that this is limited. We have to be careful with our resources. And therefore, if we talk about bioeconomy, we think of a sustainable and circular bioeconomy. So all those sustainability principles are enshrined in our bioeconomy policies. And these also expressed in the 5 objectives that the 2018 Bioeconomy Strategy has defined. You see them here. I won't read them because I imagine that you know them. But just let me show, I guess that I've shared my screen, that you see my mouse. I'm now pointing towards reduced dependence and of non-renewable unsustainable resources, one of the objectives. And the cascading principle is a very, very important principle also of the bioeconomy policy that we are defining. It is not only about the sectors and the whole system, but it's also learning from natural processes, how they function and what principles are underlying them. And the bioeconomy can learn a lot from how that works in nature and can imitate it. And that has also triggered a lot of lots of progress in biotechnology, for instance, and in the understanding how to make those substitutions. Now, there's one additional definition that we emphasized in the progress report, and that is what is bioeconomy policy, a little bit different from bioeconomy as such. And here I come back to what Agnes also was saying, that coherence, that is really, really important. If we are talking about bioeconomy policy, that means talking to everybody around the table, listening to them and hearing what are the perspectives, what are the objectives, what are the priorities, and making a coherent policy package. And then we will have trade-offs that have been mentioned. That is also obviously in the guiding questions. And these trade-offs, they are not sufficiently understood yet. And we have to understand them better. And we have to understand also how are we able to manage them? How can we resolve them? Not all of them are can be diluted, can vanish if we just know them, but we have to see what are the priorities. And again, that was already mentioned, the priority food versus energy versus materials. I think we have to carefully think what our priorities here are and if there is the need of working with that. And I will come back to that also in a moment. Now, one question was also, how has the understanding of bioeconomy evolved in the time? And now we have just a decade of bioeconomy policy. The first one was in 2012. Europe was kind of pioneering, not alone, together with some countries. Germany was very early, US was very early. And the early 2012 bioeconomy strategy was very much a knowledge-based bioeconomy. So what I said before, learning from nature principles and functions, that was understood here. Here is something that we can tap into. We can learn how it works, and we can invest into research and innovation to make our value chains, our industrial process better. Then in 2018, it became more a substitution policy. Now it was very much climate focused, but not only. It was really giving, looking at all three dimensions of sustainability, but basically it was to substitute unsustainable fossil-based products and processes. It gave also focus on region development, and it's entered also into the discourse that we need to better understand the ecological limits. Now in 2019, there was the European Green Deal, and this was really a game changer in the policy environment. Very high ambitious, how we want to move to a green and fair society. And that was also giving the council, let's say, the trigger to ask us as Commission to provide the progress report that we just published and see and ask us, look, how well have you done so far, but also look at the policy environment, what needs to be changed. And this is exactly what we have been doing. The report has two main objectives. One is actually looking at all our actions, and I will not have the time to go into those into detail and see what was the progress, but also make an assessment within the policy frame of the European Green Deal or the actual policy environment and see if there is any gap where we might have the need for focusing more. Now, just in one slide, the results on the assessment of the progress of our action plan. We have 42 actions and activities. We think that we are quite happy with the overall progress. So the action plan implementation is really well on track. We have made a strong progress on developing bio-based solutions through research innovation and increasing also the public and private investments. So Joanna also was mentioning the BBI joint undertaking or the circular bio-based Europe partnership that has just started as a follow-up as a BBI, the European Circular Bioeconomy Fund that is quite successful in funding. We have cooperation also with the EIB, of course, through our work. We have lots of Horizon Europe projects or Horizon 2020 projects that really work towards developing process and knowledge, how to move on. So this we see as really well on track. But we have also made a lot of improvement in the cooperation and with the member states. If you look at the map, and I don't have it here because it would take too long, of how many countries nowadays have a bioeconomy strategy or are in the preparation of it, this is really impressive. And not only at country level, also over 60 regions have bioeconomy strategies or have policies that are designed in the spirit of the bioeconomy. And I think this is one of the great successes also of the European bioeconomy strategy, that have given an impulse to other countries and regions to make a coherent movement towards this understanding that I've just presented, and work towards better policy making in a way. We have also made progress in the understanding of ecological limits, mainly in cooperation with the Joint Research Center and with our Horizon Europe projects. But here we see that there is still more to be done. Understanding the ecological limits is, as we are standing now, maybe not sufficient. We have to really manage and resolve the problems that we are facing. So here we might need to switch really from an understanding to a managing to more towards action. One center in our progress report was also really to look at the bioeconomy strategy in view of the European Green Deal policies. And there's one table where we try to assess the linkages actually. So we have looked at main relevant European Green Deal initiatives, and we have looked how do they relate to the 5 objectives. And these 5 objectives of the bioeconomy strategy, they encompass all 3 sustainability dimensions: environment, economy, and social. What we can see here, that there are some policies that very much focus on one of those objectives. For instance, the circular economy has a strong focus on the reduction of the dependence of unsustainable resources. That's obvious. But there are others where the link is not as clear as that. The biodiversity strategy is not all forest owners are happy with it, because they say, how can I survive? How can we continue with it? there are certain trade-offs between biodiversity and climate in a sense. Another example I would like to make is the farm to fork strategy, where I think it is obvious that we need a food system transformation that might need to switch from intensive livestock production systems in certain cases to more plant-based systems, and that needs a transition. And at the end of the transition, it will be a better system, but on the path toward that, there might be some changes that need to be managed as well. So here we have to be careful and look at it in detail, anticipate so that we don't encounter problems. Now, I would like to make a few points on that biomass flows. And here again, I just refer to Horst's presentations who have used the same data. Now we have here a presentation, the progress report that puts those Sankey diagrams together for agriculture and forestry. It is based on the 2017 data. You have downloaded it just now, and GSC in the meantime has updated from 2017, 2019. Nevertheless, it's more or less the same data. The points here are really, there's a lot of scope for improving the situation. We see here 40% of the biomass is used for feeding and bedding, only 10% directly for food. If we would shift our food systems, we could release a lot of energy and biomass that could be used for materials. We might even look at energy, and the energy question is very, very difficult, I would say. The cascading principle, you said it, and I said it also before, says that energy should only be produced if it's at the end of the chain. So first use it for materials, obviously. In the current political situation, we see some constraints that are temporarily maybe need to switch. We have seen in the REPowerEU a target on biogas, on biomethane. The question is, how can we produce that? Do we have the biomass, sustainable biomass to reach that target? If we don't have it now, maybe we can reach it for temporary for a few years until we can go down. So I think the pathway is something that the bioeconomy strategy should focus very much on, because the pathway to sustainability is something that is difficult to solve. It's not only important to know where we want to go there, we need also to know how can we go from here to there. Now, one important number that we use also in the progress report is this biomass gap. That is a projection to 2050 from the material economics, that the climate kick group that has done this study, and they say the demand for biomass in 2050 is much higher than what we can supply at that time. So the increase from now to then of supply, sustainable supply, is much slower than the demand, because we're also successful in developing processes. So we have so many ideas now what we can do with it, so that we will need a lot. But we have to close this gap, because we cannot fulfill all our objectives and targets if we have this gap. So we have to know how to close it. And bioeconomy provides different solutions. We have to first understand where are synergies to be harvested and where are the trade-offs, how to manage it. We have to increase the resource efficiency, and we have to go down with the demand. And we have to see how to do that in a way that not at the end we come up with some solutions that did not look carefully enough at all the different dimensions of sustainability, and at the end some unintended side effects happen that we would have or could have avoided a priori. And here again, I think the current situation in the Ukraine is really, really important, because the conclusion that we need to focus on this biomass gap and understand how to resolve it, how to manage it, this urgency has been underlined by the situation in Ukraine. We have a higher pressure on biomass because of the food security situation. So, I mean, we need more wheat to put on the market, because we have the scarcity now with the lack of wheat provided by the Ukraine. That's a very short-term problem that we have to solve. And we have the additional question, the additional pressure to diversify our energy supply. And the question is in the room, how much can biomass supply to that without jeopardizing the other objectives that we have in the European Green Deal? And that's a given. The European Union doesn't want to jeopardize the other objectives. We want to do that at the same time, and we have to learn how to resolve it. So our conclusion in the report, and this is, let's say, a gap analysis, where we think an additional focus could be put in the future in the implementation of the bioeconomy action plan, is twofold. One, what we call the biosphere stewardship strategy. So we have these multiple pressures on land and sea on biomass. We have to understand it better, and we have to understand how can we solve it. We have to develop a more transparent methodology and principles how to resolve it. And I think we are not yet there. We have actually started with that already last year when there was the communication sustainable carbon cycles, which some of you might have seen, where we have added one activity, one action, which we called integrated bioeconomy land use assessment. That would be the first step in the direction of a biosphere stewardship strategy to really understand where are the trade-offs. Spatially explicit also, not at very high resolution, but spatially explicit, that we know where are the areas, the forests, where we have to preserve the biodiversity, where can we maybe have a sustainable intensification or keep the harvesting rate to have a very high primary productivity and still be able to use the products for substituting the materials and store the carbon, as you rightly said, Stefan, also to have the storage benefit of the products in the bioeconomy, because this is an additional stock of carbon that is also contributing to climate mitigation. And the other one is a consumption-based framework, because we think it is obvious that consumption plays a lot of a role. There must be the responsibility of the consumption side, of the demand side. We need to go towards sustainable consumption pattern, sustainable businesses also, partly from supply of products to a service, like also proposed now in the sustainable textile strategy, that the service model could be something that could be looking into the future, could be a blueprint for more sustainable businesses. And this is something that we need also to have more focus, how to monitor the overall consumption of biological resources, not by individual people necessarily, but by entities, by regions, by companies. So to have really a grasp on that is important to move on and to tell us how to move forward. I think I have not overstressed the time. This is just a little bit a summary slide giving the main points that I've said so far. I will leave it with that and give back to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Adrian, for this also follow-up reflections, also building on what Ms. Drake said, and I think it really also adds value to the discussion over the future of bioeconomy and how and some also next actions to be taken by the Commission, also stressing elaborating more upon this challenges that need to be addressed beyond the discussion over bioenergy versus biomaterials, that we also need to think about, let's say, climate action and then also biodiversity, and how actually we avoid unnecessary negative feedbacks, negative effects on one of the other agenda, and just the need also I think it's interesting what you mentioned about plant-based food versus livestock, and that indeed there is also a big opportunity to make changes there and contribute to sustainability. And I think this is something that could be observed from the diagram shared by Horst, and also just to answer one of the questions, indeed we will be sharing the slides. So then, of course, the participants can look into these more closely. Thank you so much, Adrian. And yes, so we heard from the panelists. Of course, we will come back to some of the questions. But before I move to the Q&A, I would like to hear from our respondent for today, Signe Madsen, EU advisor sent from the Central Denmark region. Signe, we heard from our panelists and also from Ms. Drake, and happy to hear any quick reactions from your side and any additional points you would like to make when it comes to the topic of today.
Thank you very much. And thank you for taking the initiative. So our office represents Central Denmark region in Brussels. And I think namely the point raised by stakeholders in the consultation, but also just mentioned now by Adrian Leip regarding the policy coherence. Our stakeholders agree there is definitely a need for more experimental policy frameworks. So it's important to really break down the silo mentality to realize the circular bioeconomy. In our region, capital funds and private investors are investing millions of euros in bioindustrial symbiosis parks. And these parks, they aim to explore the synergies between biorefining, protein extraction from grass and blue biomass, but also pyrolysis and biochar. And on top of that, synergies with power to X. So that is the production of green hydrogen and methanol. The bio-based industrial parks, they really aim to attract circular bio-based businesses. Some of them refine blue products from mussels and seaweed, while others refine green products from grass and clover. And the aim is really to produce and innovate new products, so food and feed and fertilizer and energy. Another novelty in the design of these bioindustrial parks is their strategic location in the landscape and the location and the environmental location. So the park should really be established, taking local ecology into account. And it was also mentioned in the panel, respecting the ecological limits of these biorefineries. So in other words, they should refine the kind of biomasses that also have a positive impact on the environment and on the climate. So this could be, for example, reducing nitrogen losses through the sea and the fjords, which is a big problem locally in our region. You can see it on the slide here. This is, I tried to illustrate this. This is a facility called Leip in our region, and you have the fjords behind it. So they really try to incorporate the landscape in designing what biomasses to exploit. For instance, by converting to grass, the farmers in the local area might also be better able to meet the Water Framework Directive in the future. However, to fully exploit these potentials and also make it full circle, there is a need for more holistic regulation and more innovative regulation. Because building these bioindustrial symbioses are, it's really a big regulatory experiment. Therefore, regulatory sandboxes in this field would be interesting to test different types of regulatory instruments. This also means, for instance, addressing dilemmas. This could be in nutrient recycling, which is strictly regulated, of course, but it could also be regulating waste fractions differently and in new ways. So to sum up, there's really a need for better policy coherence and across sectors to really deepen these synergies, at least at member state level, maybe also at EU level. But this was all from me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Signe, for sharing this insights or some developments also from the regional perspective, and also the policies that you also need to support your work, and also emphasizing this importance of industrial symbiosis. That's also an interesting possibility to explore there. And yes, so we don't have a lot of time left. I think we will have time for like one round of quick reactions, reflections from all the speakers. I would like to quickly go back to Agnes at this point, building also on what we heard now from Signe about the regional examples of innovative solutions. Going back to what you presented, I just wanted to dive more into the policies that you would need to help scale up some of the innovative solutions you mentioned that the private sector needs to scale up these possibilities. And also another thing I'm interested in, and maybe like an overarching question for all of us, I guess, are the effects, of course, of the war in Ukraine over the bioeconomy demand, supply, and basically how it affects our efforts to interlink bioeconomy with the Green Deal. And I'm curious also, Agnes, about the policies you need to support these innovative bio-based solutions also under these, in the times of greater uncertainty that we're facing.
Thank you for the question. And I think, yeah, many relevant points have been mentioned in the, well, not least in the previous speaker. I think Denmark is in many ways a front runner when it comes to innovative bio-based solutions. So that was very interesting to hear. And of course, all the other speakers as well. Yeah, I think we've heard it many times before, but it's still about overcoming the value of death in bioeconomy innovations and really bringing innovative products more to being commercialized in Europe. I think when we talk about the bioeconomy, it's important to consider the 3 pillars of sustainability, but also emphasize the word economy in bioeconomy, that we want to be competitive here. So I think supportive and agile regulatory and policy frameworks are very important. I think we have heard also examples of, what has happened in the last 10 years since the bioeconomy strategy was first in place. And I think there are a lot of great examples mentioned when it comes to, research and innovation, when it comes to developments at national level. I think when it comes to market stimulation measures for bio-based products, there's still further potential to be realized there. And I think we really need to encourage the use of bio-based alternatives in the various relevant sectors, like packaging, chemicals, energy, coatings. And I think also what was mentioned now about experimental, regulatory sandboxes can also be important to really bring or help bring out the potential and bringing to market. And I think maybe another example is also, we're talking a lot about, how can we compare? And there's a lot of discussion at EU level about methodologies, comparisons, fossil-based, bio-based. And I think it's very important there also to make fair comparisons, to account for issues such as biogenic carbon uptake, to also take into consideration, for example, if you compare bio-based and fossil-based, that fossil-based is a very mature system that has developed, production systems that have developed over decades, and many bio-based innovations are more novel. So I think that's something to also keep in mind. So those are a few examples from my side.
Thank you, Agnes, for these additional reflections. I would then like to address the question we received in the Q&A box from Bernard Galambert. So about the carbon storage and the benefits of bioeconomy when it comes to natural-based carbon storage, and how can it be better recognized? How can we valorize it and support, give credit, incentivize economic actors that you actually provide this sort of kind of services, biogenic carbon storage, compared to other ways of storing carbon and basically also reducing greenhouse gas emissions? I think it's a very interesting question. It also brings, it's also linked to a more wider question on how to actually incentivize and valorize all these activities when it comes to bioeconomy and hidden benefits for climate and environment. Horst, I would like to maybe, if you could maybe expand upon that point you made in your presentation, and any ideas that you could have, be it at the EU level or German level or Länder level, any ideas or how this could be done, or any additional points you could make on this?
Yeah. First of all, it's important to see that the storage could happen at several stages. The first of all is if you for instance talk about the forests, then we know forests are very intensive carbon storages, and they can even be increased in there. So it's always a question of how to do your forest management. That's the one point that has to be taken into account when we talk about, for instance, taking wood fuel from the forest, and then if you just apply it like that, it might be overall not really with an overall beneficial carbon or a greenhouse gas balance. If you do then a carbon carbon capture and storage in that point, then of course then you got a really strong storage point at that stage. And that was also by the IPCC once in one of their last reports strongly mentioned that could play a role But that is again something we have to take into account, maybe for very specific applications like large scale bioenergy plants. On the other side, we should not lose from our minds the carbon storage in products when we have short living and long living products in there, and let's say at least in over lifetime of more or less long living products. That is something, that is still something that is not covered in the, let's say, mainstream greenhouse gas balances. So we don't know exactly we don't have the information. And before validating something like that, I think we need the carbon information on these things. And if we have something like that in place, then, and in, let's say, of course, highly standardized and restricted carbon balancing systems, we need it at least as much as we have that standardized, for instance, in something like the Renewable Energy Directive, with the carbon calculation in there. I think it needs even more strengthening in there, and there we can have an information about that. But again, while I'm referring to the Renewable Energy Directive, we see nothing like that is in place for the materials. And specifically, if we take, for instance, you capture the CO2 from a biological system and then bring it into a e-fuel system, for instance, for renewable fuels of non-biological origin, then that fuel will be climate neutral, while the CO2 comes from the biological system, which is not validating, well, not getting any credit from that anymore. That shows that, again, what we need, of course, is a clarity on carbon storages, how they work, and to what we have to attribute them in the end also. Because from my, again, might repeat too much from my from my presentation. Again, it's mostly the energy system who gains the credit, and makes it claims for its thing. We need something for that, specifically for the materials. Otherwise, we won't manage it, get it into the bioeconomy correctly.
Thank you so much, Horst, for reflecting on this and also illustrating the complexities behind, and there are still unknowns that we need to explore so we can actually give more definite answers to this. And I think this also brings me back to Adrian, as you mentioned, that we still need to do some additional research and as a follow-up to also the current strategy and the report. And I wanted to ask you, Adrian, also, like, if you have anything to add on this question, and more broadly, how can we valorize this kind of good practices and economic actors actually using bioeconomy for the benefit of climate and environment, and how, if you have anything to add on what you already said, how this can be translated and actually provide some kind of a incentive to the actors acting towards meeting these objectives.
Yes, thank you for the question. I think that is really a very pertinent issue, because of course, if we all want society, economy move towards more sustainability, and then how we measure it, how we quantify the carbon balance, the greenhouse gas balance is very important. And so far, indeed, the bio-based industry is confronted with a bias. That's what we hear also in the question from Bernard, that materials are disadvantaged in a way through the accounting system that is currently in place. A lot of accounting is done with a life cycle assessment. That is a very important tool, also in relationship to the new initiatives that I think on, let's say, the gaps that I mentioned in my presentation. So like to have really a good view of the whole systemic impact or greenhouse gas emissions of a product is important. But what is in the moment the most important tool for doing that, the product environmental footprint methodology that has been developed also by colleagues at the JRC, does not really have a method of how to account for storage of carbon materials. But this is the case because it is very difficult how to do it. It is a temporary storage. And so in a way, the current basic assumption is that, okay, you take it out from the atmosphere, you store it in the product, and then after the lifetime, end of life of the product, it goes back to the atmosphere again, so it has no impact. But of course, this gives no credits to it, but we know that this is the benefit that we want to have, that it is stored in the materials. I mean, look at all the numbers again that were shown here. There is a significant amount of carbon that is stored in the technosphere, let's say in our society, that takes it away. And if we have a dynamic equilibrium and we keep that stock constant, then each of the products contribute to that benefit. And it is an additional storage, and it keeps the carbon concentration in the atmosphere lower than it were without it. So I think we all agree that this needs to be, let's say, accounted for in a way, but how to do it is difficult. And the JSC so far has not come up with a robust methodology and agreed methodology how it can be incorporated. And the colleagues there are working with the community, with the scientific community, life cycle assessment community, carbon modeling community, to see how to do that. That's one point. And I hope that there will be soon, I mean, this is now on the agenda, I guess, of many projects worldwide, not only of the ones that we are sponsoring or say financing from the European Commission side. So that I hope that there will be quick advances so that we can soon get an idea how that could be done. The other point is, again, the sustainable carbon cycles communication. Carbon farming is also quite difficult, starting from soils where basically the system is the same. You sequester carbon in the soil, but after a while there is saturation of the carbon stock that can be sequestered. It is 20 years. The default IPCC in forest is 20 years. That's just the number to make it accountable, because many don't know really what the lifetime is. For grassland, it might be higher, but never mind. I mean, at a certain point in time, you have an equilibrium, and then it stays there, and we have to keep it there. So this is also kind of a temporary sequestration, but you cannot change the system, otherwise you re-lose it. And that is the question of permanency is very important also there. Now, this communication had another activity. This is called certification of carbon credits through carbon farming, and this is now, let's say, in the moment. Developed by colleagues at the European Commission here. What actually should these certification contain? What is the preferred way? There will be a public consultation. So this is an ongoing process. And of course, for the bioeconomy, it would be good if that certification would include also responses how to deal with temporary storage. That, I think, would be very important also in the step towards crediting, accounting for that benefit for us. We'll see how it develops, what comes out of that process. We are in an early stage there, but I think it is one opportunity, at least for voluntary markets of carbon credits. But at least it will inform us how that could be done, and then we should see if that is sufficient or whether we have to move on. But this is something to be seen there. So these are two, let's say, initial responses to that point. It is really a pertinent questions that needs to be solved.
Thank you so much for reflecting it, and indeed something also something to work on in the future. Thank you so much. And Felipe, I would like to then come back to you also based on what we heard so far. Happy to hear any additional reflections on the EIB's role in supporting bioeconomy and then supporting in that way the Green Deal. And also you could expand a bit more also on what you, the final part of your presentation on the challenges and also the complexities brought and difficulties brought by the war in Ukraine. If you have anything to say on top of what you already said before and anything to add on top of what we already heard, happy to hear from you.
Thanks. Do you hear me? Because I changed the system. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. No, thanks. I mean, very quickly. I mean, we have covered a broad range of aspects. Like the bioeconomy is actually quite broad, but maybe if I can pick up a couple of things. For example, one thing I would say, which actually links with the Ukraine crisis as well, is the nutrient cycles, right, for agriculture and forestry. If we extract biomass from, if we use biomass somewhere else and do not return these nutrients to the soil, we have to compensate it with fertilizers, right? And there's where, in principle, in this whole discussions today, I've been missing. I know it's a bit unpopular aspect, but sustainable animal rearing play an important role in this neutral carbon cycles and food security as well. So this is something that we should not ignore. And in principle, this this discussion between using the biomass for biomaterials versus animal rearing is something that needs to be more analyzed more in depth, because it is not, in my view, so easy. You know, linking to this. Precisely because of also the nutrient cycles that are very important. I mean, if you talk with organic farmers, for example, the animal rearing is very important for them, because it recycles nutrients, and at the end, the end product of the animal rearing also is important for the biogas production as well. So together with the biomass and the plant-based biomass. The other point is on the carbon storage, which is, I think, a very important one. At the EIB, we have been trying to understand how we can actually support from our side these carbon markets, these informal carbon markets. And as was said before, the certification is critical. And it's critical from 2 points of view. One is you need to have a certification to give credibility to the carbon removals, and also credibility to those that want to offset. And that is a big point that I would like to highlight, is the role of offsetting also in the EU policy, because it's not very clear if this is really wanted or not wanted. I think in the decarbonization pathway, there is a minimum set of offsetting that will be needed even beyond 2050. So I would say probably the answer is yes, but with conditions, I would say probably. So the offsetting part, so for what it is used, and then there are two main thinking streams. One is to condition, for example, agricultural subsidies and forestry subsidies to these carbon and environmental activities, which is one mainstream, and the other is to create this private informal credits markets of credit markets, which is in fact an area where we as EIB are also very interested to try to see how we can help structuring these carbon markets. But before we don't have a credible certification scheme, it is very, very difficult, right? So in the overall, I'm a bit more relaxed, because, as you know, the Renewables Energy Directive needs to be read complementarity to the LULUCF directive, which actually at country level already tries to do and to promote this carbon stocks at forestry level. It's mainly forestry based, but it can be extended as well in that sense. No, and the other big area that was touched, and I fully agree that renewables materials directive would probably help a lot the sector to be developed, right? That is very important. To close with Ukraine, I mean, everything that has happened and related to Ukraine is very sad. Of course, it's dramatic, it's outrageous. There are two areas. One mentioned was the supply of grains. That, of course, the supply of grains from Ukraine and also Russia itself is very important in the tradable part. It is determining the prices of good mainly, but can also, depending on how the harvest goes in other countries, have also supply related issues. But the price is very relevant for weaker economies and weaker households. So that is very important, but also for the bioeconomy value chain. The bioeconomy value chain is currently, including and especially the food value chain, under a lot of pressure, because the farmers, even though the prices are very high, they don't recover the costs. So they are really pressured by the higher input costs as well, the higher fertilizer costs, the higher fuel costs, the higher everything costs, right? But then this is passed through the whole value chain, because at the end, it also means higher costs for the food and for the biomaterials. But probably what we are seeing, and this would deserve a more detailed analysis, this cost increases are not fully passed through the end consumer currently, right? And this puts the whole value chain under pressure, and the viability of biomass systems. And at the end, how is this relevant to the EIB and other banks? Is, of course, if you have compromised farmers, compromised SMEs, their access to finance will also be compromised. And there's, on one hand, it's our role as a public bank to enhance this financing supply to the whole value chain, but also a preoccupation, because at the end we still are a bank and need to see the money flows come back. So in principle, our main focus is to invest on viable bioeconomy value chain systems, and with the current situation, it does not help, right? This viability of supply chains. Sorry, I talked a bit longer, but I think it's.
Thank you so much, Felipe, for your additional comments on this topic. Very much appreciated. And yes, indeed, we are going a bit over time, so we need to wrap up. But I just wanted to double check, Signe, you turned your camera on. If you wanted to provide any quick reaction, or okay, so just wanted to check. In that case, indeed, I would like to thank all of the speakers for their valuable contributions, and also again to Ms. Drake for the pre-recorded statement, and also to participants for their attendance and their involvement. Indeed, we see that there are lots of opportunities with bioeconomy to contribute to the Green Deal and making our economy more resilient and more sustainable. There are also challenges when it comes to unknowns that still need to be explored when it comes to these links between the green agenda and bioeconomy, and also to meet different objectives and address the potential trade-offs. So definitely more to be done, but what I think is clear is that bioeconomy remains highly relevant the EU's policy agenda, and it is definitely important to continue to work on this to actually to reap the benefits and avoid any negative side effects. So I would like to thank you, all of you, once again, and looking forward to having you at our future events.